Welcome back, guys. Today we have on Barbie Boules, who is a registered dietitian, and she focuses on metabolic and brain health for women over 40. And we have been following your Instagram page. We highly suggest, if you guys want to learn more about your health over 40, follow the Cognition Dietitian on Instagram because Barbie has so much valuable information. And welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you, ladies, for inviting me. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Well, we get asked frequently by our listeners. It's one of the top questions we ask. I am doing everything I used to do. I'm 40 plus and my metabolism has just stopped. So we thought, this is a great topic to talk to Barbie about. What do you say to women who are coming to you saying, I just don't know what I'm doing wrong?
So that's every single client that comes to me, if she's a woman over 40. And that's me as well, and I'm 52. So I would say about 45, I started to notice that I could no longer do what I used to do and still feel the way I wanted to feel, have the body composition I wanted to have. And so it's a very real thing. Now, we know for sure that estrogen has an impact on blood lipids, blood sugar, blood pressure, and certainly the brain, the gut, liver health, everything. We know that that's a fact. We don't know all of the mechanisms. And we also know for sure that estrogen redistributes fat to the belly area. What is in dispute is, because we just don't have enough research, particularly on women of our ages, what is in dispute is the reason behind actual weight gain. The body composition shift, everybody recognizes, but the weight gain that happens, no one can quite agree on whether that is genuinely due to a reduction in metabolic rate, changes in estrogen, or if it's just habit change. To which I say, who cares? Because at the end of the day, we have to do the same thing if we have a desire to change it. If we don't have a desire to change it, cool. And no one should judge you for that. But if you're feeling like, I just don't feel as good as I used to, and I want to, really the number one way to do that, and I feel like this is sort of an essential for women in midlife, is strength training, because that is the thing that will actually increase your metabolic rate. There are a lot of weird supplements and diets and recommendations for how to boost metabolism. None of that is actually valid. The only thing you can truly do to genuinely increase your metabolic rate is strength training. That also protects your bones. It also improves insulin sensitivity. It improves your body composition to help with that visceral fat that might be developing. So the number one thing I say is, are you ready to strength train?
And how much strength training should you be doing? How often and how much? And, how intense should you be doing?
So that is going to be very dependent upon the woman. What I always say to my clients is we all have an effort threshold, right? And again, no one should judge you for what your effort threshold is. And it might vary from day to day, but you do need to take ownership and be honest with yourself about what that is, because you don't want to disappoint yourself. Let's make it impossible to fail. So I say, if you can do 5 minutes a day, 5 minutes once a week, whatever, it's 5 minutes you weren't doing before, but hopefully over time, we can gradually build it to the recommendation of 70 minutes a week, which is, you can divide that up however you want. I personally do about 10 to 20 minutes a day, because the way I like to work exercise, and what I really recommend for people who either haven't done it in a while or just has never really felt like their thing, is to make an appointment with yourself every single day. Don't take a day off in the beginning. Once you get used to it and you love it and it feels like, oh, my day is missing something if I don't have this, then fine, then shimmy it around. But initially, make an appointment like you would with anyone else that you don't want to disappoint, because you shouldn't disappoint yourself, and make it for the same amount of time. You can do whatever you want. You can do cardio, you can do strength training, you can do a combination, you can do yoga, you can take a walk, you can roll around on the floor, whatever you want to do, but you are keeping that appointment. And ultimately, it will become something that is changing things for the better. Just one more thing I want to say about exercise. What I really encourage my clients to do, and hopefully I send this message as well, is so many of us have a relationship with exercise that is about compensation for calories eaten or calories that we're going to eat. And you may have heard me say it if you've seen some of my reels, but that feels like punishment. That is not the relationship you want to develop with exercise. If we can instead, we want the body composition shift, we want all those awesome benefits, but those take time. And if we're not seeing results right away, we might give up prematurely. If we can focus on what one workout does, and one workout, even midway through the workout, better mood, better sleep, better glucose regulation, all these awesome things are happening while you're working out and last that entire day. So if we can just focus on one workout instead of, oh, I want this or this, I think we'd stick with it a lot better.
Bridget and I talk about the fact that, when we were younger, we exercised to fit in the dress that we needed to fit in next month. But now we exercise more for our mental health, our physical health, and to live healthier longer. And I think that's a really big mindset for women 40 plus. Do you want to be healthier longer? Do you want to have a strong bones and muscle strength? Do you find that that's kind of an aha moment for some of your clients?
100%. Often when I say what I just said about shifting it to what happens in the one workout, they're like, oh, I just never thought of it that way. Because we grew up in the 80s. We're and the early 90s, we're conditioned to be thinking of our health through a lens of what is this going to do for the way I look, as opposed to how is this genuinely going to improve my health? And also when you're younger, you're not really thinking about strong bones and creaky joints and brain health and the risk of dementia or even heart disease and diabetes. You're thinking more about how hot do I look at the club, right? And so for sure, that's why we were exercising when we were younger. But in my opinion, that's just a really outdated way to think about it, because it does so much more than that. If that's all we're thinking about, we're missing kind of the point, as far as I'm concerned, because the human body, this is part of the reason that a sedentary lifestyle is usually on most lists second only to smoking cigarettes as a risk factor for disease or dying prematurely. The human body is designed to move. It is not designed to be sedentary. And that, I think, is most people blame food. I think that our lack of movement is just as much to blame as, a lot of the ultra processed foods that we're over consuming and things like that. I think we are designed to move. We are designed to move a lot more than we do. And we have to find a way to find something that we love so that we can become more active. Listen, when I'm 80, I want to be skiing with my grandchildren. And that's what I think about. And that, having a why like that, not the number on the scale, or I just know it's good for me. That's not very motivating. But if you can have a specific goal in mind, like literally, I want to be skiing with my grandchildren, or I want to be running around Disney World, or, I don't want to be hobbling along behind anybody, exercise becomes a lot more appealing.
What do you say to clients? And I know often we'll hear this, that they will go to their physician and it will just almost be traumatizing because the physician, whoever it might be, some physicians are more considerate and have a better, bedside manner than others, but they really put them down just about weight. And what do you say to clients? I'm sure you've had clients that come to you with this.
Like, just lose the weight. The problem will go away if you just lose the weight.
And they're very mentally just, it can be very draining.
You can't believe what I have heard from my clients telling me what their doctors have said to them. Now, this is multifactorial, and I don't want to throw a whole bunch of shade at doctors because I have the utmost respect. They save lives every day. I have a lot of medical people in my family, doctors included. But what I will say is two things. First of all, they don't have time to instruct. Secondly, they are not educated to instruct on things like weight loss and body composition. Their focus is disease-oriented, medication-oriented, surgery-oriented, not preventative. We're getting there sort of, but the vast majority of doctors will look at a person and say, okay, your cholesterol is borderline, your blood sugar is borderline, you know, your blood pressure is up a little bit, just go lose some weight. Have you tried keto? Have you tried intermittent fasting? You know, the butter's okay, just don't eat the bread. I've heard all of this. None of this is helpful. It is spectacularly unhelpful, in fact. I really wish more doctors would take the initiative to have relationships with dietitians who specialize in, say, diabetes, heart disease, renal disease, high blood pressure, eating disorder, whatever it is, so that they can refer out, so that their patients can get really genuinely good help. Because all of these patients will walk away and say, well, okay, lose weight. What do I do? Starve myself and exercise? I don't know what to do with that. So it's just, it's really disappointing, but it's also, we think of our doctors as our front line. They should know everything, right? They should know about nutrition, but the fact is they don't. There's a reason we have registered dietitians. You wouldn't go to, you know, a heart surgeon to deal with a broken leg. And it's the same thing as going to your primary physician for nutrition. So I say, if that is you and you've heard that from your doctor, please do seek out a nutrition professional, because we are here to help.
So if you are someone who has gone to a doctor and said, you know what, your blood pressure is a little elevated, your glucose is a little elevated, let's start now before it gets to the point where you're pre-diabetic. What are some of the steps women can take?
So okay, I have so many times this year, it's over 25 people who have new clients who have come to me, and I always look at labs, because oftentimes doctors will not say what you just said. They will not point out borderline illness or to be preventative. They will wait until someone needs medication in order to start addressing it. So that's why I always look at labs. And over 25 people this year, I've identified metabolic syndrome, and their doctor did not mention it. So if they do, or if you know, this is why, you know, self-advocacy, being empowered, knowing what these numbers mean, it's not very hard. You can Google it. What is normal blood pressure? What is normal LDL, HDL, and triglycerides? What is, you know, normal fasting glucose and A1C, and where should my, you know, waist circumference be, or waist to hip ratio? Know those numbers so that when you look at your labs, you can see, and generally there's something that's, you know, a little H or an L or whatever that says that it's outside of range. But I really want people to be empowered and know what those numbers mean, so that even if your doctor doesn't point it out because you're just borderline, you know that there's something you need to start addressing. So, and I get this a lot with women over 40, particularly over 45, where the doctor did not say anything, but I'm looking at metabolic syndrome. So I know that we have to start looking at her. Just to clarify, metabolic health is blood pressure, blood lipids, blood sugar, and visceral fat. So those are the four components of metabolic health. If you have dysregulation in any three of these four, you have metabolic syndrome. And only recent estimates say that only 12% of US adults, now this does not differentiate between men and women, but only 12% of US adults are metabolically healthy, meaning 88% of US adults have at least one of those conditions, if not more. That is an epidemic. And so it is not unusual that someone could be walking around at the precipice of illness and kind of, it hasn't really been pointed out to them. So what do we do? So whatever the situation is, whether it's lipids, blood sugar, visceral fat, lipids, blood sugar, blood pressure, we just start teasing it apart. You know, let's target this from nutrition, sleep, exercise, and stress. It's what I call the 4 pillars of optimal health. And I address each from a nutrition, sleep, exercise, and stress perspective, so that we are really healing their metabolic health, which benefits your brain, because your brain health rests on your metabolic health. And that is a message that I really just want to make very clear. A lot of the time, because high blood pressure, high cholesterol, high blood sugar, and excess intra-abdominal fat is so common, we've sort of normalized it. Like, oh, okay, here's your medication, I'll see you in a year. It's not normal. It's very common, but it's not normal. And we don't want it to progress, particularly because all of these illnesses have a, a roadmap to dementia. And that's the piece I don't think a lot of people see, that we really are laying the foundation for better brain health, lowering our risk of cognitive decline, lowering our risk of Alzheimer's, right now, really starting in our 30s. But we really have an opportunity right now, we as women in our 40s and 50s and early 60s, to really affect change for the decades to come.
Are there any like just outline symptoms if you're going through this age? I mean, I know the weight gain, that's visible, but is there anything that your body might be sending you a message that's going on with your blood pressure or your, blood sugar, glucose count? I don't even know what you call it for real, but is there any indication of that?
I am so glad you said that, because no, these are all silent conditions. You don't know if you have elevated LDL cholesterol or low HDL or high triglycerides. You don't know if you have high blood pressure unless it's extreme, and you might get headaches or dizziness or even like actually feel pressure, but that's rare. You don't know if you have high blood sugar. You certainly, excess intra-abdominal fat, like you said, is going to be obvious, but the other three very dangerous conditions are completely silent. And that's why staying in regular contact with your doctor at least once a year, getting these things evaluated, is really important.
So, as someone who is a sugar addict and freely admits it and has tried many things to kind of lower the amount of sugar intake, it's challenging. And as we get older, it's not as simple as someone just saying, well, get rid of all the sugar in your diet, because you immediately resent that. Like you said before, it's like a punishment. How do we introduce or remove certain things in our diet that might help with your glucose levels?
Right. So first of all, self-kindness, no shame. Shame does not belong in your relationship with food. No guilt, no shame, no negative feelings. That will relieve some of the stress out of it. Just understanding instead of calling yourself an addict, just admit you're somebody who loves sugar, whatever. That's okay. We're designed, the human body, the palate, our brain is designed to love sugar. It's what keeps us alive. It's what attracts us to food. It's what lights up dopamine and other happy hormones. So what I would say is, it's not about removing this from your life, because that is generally a strategy that backfires. It's more about, first and foremost, taking a mindful step back. Like, okay, when am I reaching for this? What am I reaching for? What is the quantity? How am I feeling when this is going on? Is there something else that is non-food that I could start replacing some of these episodes, let's call them, with something else that also lights up dopamine? That's the key piece. When any habit change, whether it's food related or not, when you are changing a habit, you must replace it with something else that gives you the same or similar feeling. So, you can't just create this void in your life, especially if it was something that you loved that much. So you can mediate it a bit, but you need to bring in things that also, again, light up that dopamine pathway, that are hopefully more health promoting, like a walk, meditation, natural sunlight, fresh air, dance. My personal favorite is dancing and singing to my favorite song of the moment, and like really going bananas, because that just completely clears my head. I'm also a meditation teacher, so I'm very partial to that, but deep breathing works in a pinch. So finding things to replace it, but not all of it. You want to be able to give yourself that little bit of a treat. But again, it's that mindful step back. You kind of have to take inventory of what exactly is going on. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
It does, especially the not leaving the void. I was like, I never thought of it that way. It's just, you've got to do something to fulfill that. And it doesn't have to be food. So I think I read somewhere about puzzles or anything like that you could do that's going to take that void.
Absolutely. Think of things you loved when you were a child, and it doesn't need to be the same activity, but what was the idea? Was it nature? Was it reading? Was it movies? Was it, playing? Was it coloring? Whatever. That'll help you start figuring out what kinds of things are going to light you up like that.
When we talk about sugar, we also talk about it in terms of menopause and how it's not a friend to the menopause symptoms. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So sugar, well, okay, so let's differentiate. There's glucose, which is present in all plant foods, and we want a lot of plant foods because we want the phytonutrients and the vitamins and minerals and hydration and fiber. When it's processed into sucrose, so glucose and fructose, and we consume it in abundance, over time, that can become inflammatory. It isn't just that every little teaspoon of sugar that you put in your coffee or whatever sprinkle on your cereal is a problem. It's when we overconsume refined sugar and starches over time that there is an inflammatory process. When we overwhelm, it's not that sugar directly causes diabetes or insulin resistance. In fact, saturated fat is just as implicated in insulin resistance as an overabundance of glucose. It's really more about that intra-abdominal fat creating the insulin resistance, and however you get there is the causative factor there. So what we want to do is, ideally, we're keeping our added sugar to under 6 teaspoons a day. We're going crazy with the fruits and the veggies and the, other plant foods that contain glucose. But in terms of refined sugar, we want to try to keep it to under 6 teaspoons. That's not easy when a soda has 10 teaspoons, a grande caramel macchiato has about 13. And then if you have like a muffin with it, now you're up to like 30. And so that's enough for several days. Do you know what I'm saying? And see, it's not that sugar itself is the problem. It's the quantity that we're consuming. Right. And if we're consuming a lot of takeout, restaurant, prepackaged, ultra-processed foods, we're probably consuming too much because those foods are laden with sugar, and we kind of just don't recognize it. Whereas if we are mostly just kind of cooking from home and using whole foods, we're probably not getting too much. And we should not be afraid of fruit. I really want to make that point. Let's not be afraid of fruit. Fruit is your friend. Fruit, especially berries, is awesome for your brain. So yeah, it can increase inflammation. And again, what I like to say is there is a sweet spot for carbohydrates for every woman, for every person, really. We don't want to underdo it, because that can cause brain fog and fatigue and compromise our cognition and aggravate other symptoms of peri-menopause and menopause. But too much does the same thing. So it's this sort of, we want to find that right spot for us, and that's going to be unique to you. You have to play with what that looks like for you, for getting it right. Did that make sense?
Oh, it does. Absolutely. And, with inflammation, and we've heard it from many people that we've talked to and interviewed, that seems to be such a cause of so many problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it seems like women, when we hit that menopausal age, all of this perfect storm just happens right there.
Yeah, well, that, first the erraticism of estrogen, and then the steady decline. And ultimately, it's quite low. That, as I was saying earlier, estrogen plays a role in just about everything that goes on in the female and, quite frankly, male body, but it's just more, more obvious in us. And of course, we lose it. And that just kind of starts dysregulating everything. And so it's a point in our lives where we really do kind of have to double down if we want to feel really good. And that's, what I try to help women do. Figure out what's exactly right for them that's going to help them pick up the pieces, pull it back together, and move forward in a way that makes sense. And it's not going to look like what it looked like before. Hopefully it's going to be better.
Right. And I also like too that you talked about the 4 pillars, but also it seems you really individualize this, that this is not a one size fits all, that this isn't something that you're going to put out there and everybody follow this to a T. And
I will never write a book like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are a lot of people I admire who write books like that, and I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but The unfortunate part of that is the message. There's no way around it. The message is, here this is, this works for everybody, you know, have at it. If it didn't work for you, there's something wrong with you. And that is what I have been dealing with my entire career. Women coming to me and saying, I tried this, my best friend does it, it's amazing for her, and it's not working for me. What's wrong with me? Everybody is physiologically unique. And so a book or a website or a particular person can't lay out a plan that's going to work for maybe even more than one person, really. So it has to be really individualized. Has to be.
We were interviewing someone who said that if you're in a grocery store, and these are like little snippets that resonate with more than one person, that if you're in a grocery store and you pick up a product and the fiber and the protein together are higher than the added sugars, the number, then it's generally on your okay, you can get list. What do you think of that?
Okay. I mean, I can go with that. That's actually something I've never heard. What I would prefer is someone look at the added sugar, or that's not bad advice. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is what I advise my clients is look at the added sugar. Let's say it's a yogurt. Okay. And this is where kind of, you have to evaluate for yourself. Let's say it's a container of yogurt. If you were to eat plain yogurt at home and sweeten it yourself, you might put a teaspoon in and stir it around, and that might be sweet enough for you. In a commercially prepared yogurt is more likely to have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teaspoons. So pay attention there and see if that's reasonable. Do you know what I'm saying? Also, how does that fit within the context of what else you've eaten that day? This I'm huge on. Everything has to be within context. So people will ask me, can I eat eggs? Are eggs okay? First of all, eggs are an excellent source of protein. Lots of benefits in eggs. What we want to be careful about eggs is the saturated fat in the yolk. Not very much, like 1.6 grams. However, if you're somebody who likes a 3-egg omelet every morning, but you otherwise eat a lot of fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds and beans and fiber, and you don't eat a whole lot of red meat, and you exercise, do you with the eggs. If you're somebody who cooks with a lot of butter, has steak several times a week, you don't really exercise very much, then I want to start playing with how many egg yolks you have a week. Does that make sense? So it's like, we got to look at context. So I don't think that a blanket statement about what to look for on a label is very helpful when you're not also thinking about what else does that person have going on. But ideally, you're keeping a serving of whatever to no more than 4 grams of sugar, which is a teaspoon.
Well,
and you want fiber for sure.
Sitting here writing it down.
No, that's helpful. Luckily, we've taped it, Bridget, so you can.
Yes, I know. I'm writing it, so I
want.
know it right now. Yes.
Another thing that I have heard is that for Alzheimer's and some forms of dementia, that women are more inclined to be diagnosed than men. Mm-hmm. Do you attribute that to the estrogen or our inflammatory responses? Do you have an opinion on that?
I do. It follows the research, which again, there is 2/3 of Alzheimer's patients are women. So we outnumber, we are at double the risk of Alzheimer's compared to men. The belief used to be that is because women live longer, but really, honestly, we've never lived longer than a few years over men in terms of life expectancy. So that was never a very satisfying explanation. We now know that, yes, the menopause transition causes changes in the brain that are likely related to a decline in estrogen, that change the metabolism in the brain, that increase beta amyloid plaques, tau tangles, and other inflammatory shrinkage of the hippocampus, which is where largely responsible for our memory. That definitely the menopause transition is involved, just like it is for blood pressure, blood lipids, blood sugar, and intra-abdominal fat. But the mechanism isn't completely understood. And there is research now about hormone replacement therapy potentially decreasing risk, but we're not totally there yet in terms of being able to recommend HRT specifically for lowering dementia risk. So it's underway, that research. But yes, for sure, women are at an increased risk. And then there's, also not everybody will ever find out how their genes play a role, but there is a gene that can put you at an increased risk, as well, APOE. And if you have the 4 allele, there are 3 alleles, 2, 3, and 4. If you get a copy of APOE from each parent, and so you will have 2 copies. And if you have a 4, you are at an increased risk. And if you have 2 4s, you are at a significantly increased risk. But just because you have a 4 doesn't mean you will get Alzheimer's, and just because you don't doesn't mean you won't. So there is that genetic component.
Sounds like a Chris Hemsworth kind of thing, didn't he?
He has 2 4s. Yeah, that was his concern. And when you have a 4 or 2 4s, you want to take extra precaution. It's just, another layer. It doesn't mean it's not determinative. There are 3 genes that are determinative for Alzheimer's, early Alzheimer's, but they're extremely rare. APOE 4 is not as rare, but it doesn't mean you will get Alzheimer's. It does mean it's an added layer of risk, and you want to take extra precaution. But I personally, there is one of the pinned reels on my Instagram page is knowing your risk factors, and there are about 25 of them. And it's like, if you can tick a whole bunch of boxes there, you really do want to be doing everything you can for prevention.
And that's
why I can tick several boxes. So,
well, 25, we all could probably, check off at least one, but that's why I recommend the Cognition Dietitian Instagram, because you really do have a wealth of information on there that people can have access to. So, and we'll have all those links in the show notes, your website, your Instagram, we'll have all that linked in our show notes. Now, you also spoke about sleep for women. What's the again, it's an individualized thing. Some women are fine with 6 to 7, some are 7 to 8. I'm an 8 to 9. If I don't get 8 to 9 hours, I'm not that pleasant the next day.
Good for you. So yes, sleep is crucial to the health of your brain and your metabolic health. And of course, that is something that can really become disrupted with hormonal fluctuations. So we really do want to do everything we can to prioritize it. The brain actually shrinks if we are sleep deprived chronically. So again, another layer of risk if we are sleep deprived. So one thing I want to say, and this is a little bit about the mindset, the mindset shift about exercise, thinking of it as like, what is this one workout going to give me instead of how am I going to look 6 months from now? You are preparing for a good night's sleep from the second that you wake up. Most people don't think of sleep until after dinner, but everything you've done all day, everything you've eaten, how you've handled stress, whether or not you've taken a few breaks for yourself, whether or not you've exercised, that is all going to contribute to the quality of your sleep. And I don't mean you want to micromanage your day to make sure you get like a perfect amount of sleep, but just having that mindset, I want to get some morning sunlight because I know that helps regulate the hormones that help contribute to a good night's sleep. I want to exercise because that promotes a good night's sleep. I want to make sure I get enough protein. I've nourished myself well. I want to make sure I've got some stress relief techniques so that I'm not going nuts as I put my head on the pillow. So just thinking of it like my whole day is a route towards better sleep or away from. And I have a couple books I want to recommend, so don't let me forget at the end. Put them in the
okay.
Awesome. Yeah. When you say morning sunlight, you mean go outside?
So you don't have to. I mean, best case scenario, within say an hour of sunrise, you step outside for about 10 minutes and you look in the direction of the sun. Obviously, we don't want to be staring at the sun. But even if it's cloudy out, that full spectrum light is there. And that's really what it's about. It's about getting that full spectrum light, which does wonderful things for your brain chemistry that improve your day, your brain performance, and help you get a better night's sleep. You can sit by a window. You can sit on your couch if it's a really sunny room. But just making sure you're prioritizing that morning sunlight. It does wonderful things. And if you're a person who suffers from seasonal affective disorder, it can really change the game. It has for me. I've been very intentional the last 2 years about getting morning sunlight, and my SAD symptoms have decreased by about 75%.
Wow. Okay. That's good to know.
That's very good
for our
to know.
listeners.
Yes.
My last question is, there has been so much talk recently about intermittent fasting for women over 40.
Mhm.
What do you think? Do you think that is a good plan for women? Because it have health benefits?
So yeah, there's a giant push for intermittent fasting for perimenopausal and menopausal women, and there's a giant push for keto. um, as far as intermittent fasting is concerned, I am reserving judgment until there is better research. There isn't a lot of great research in humans, despite what you'd think, given the way some people advocate for it. What I will say about intermittent fasting is it is very whether or not it's going to be beneficial is very again, individualized, personality based. Are you someone who likes parameters? Do you thrive when you've got some rules? If so, intermittent fasting might be very appropriate for your lifestyle. If you are someone who really enjoys eating whenever they want, that contributes to your health, and it feels too restrictive and you kind of stress out about your eating window, then it's not appropriate for you. So that's just a very practical standpoint. There are so many approaches to intermittent fasting. There is 12-12, there's 16-8, there's people who only eat for a window of 4 hours. There are people who eat whatever they want for 5 days and fast, or meaning eat under 500 calories for 2 days a week. There's so many different ways to approach it. It has not been researched well yet to determine like which, if any of those strategies are really beneficial. And then it's like, what are we really looking at? Are we looking at weight loss? Are we looking at blood lipids, blood sugar, blood pressure, visceral fat? There's so many different ways we can look at it. I will say in terms of weight loss, thus far, it has not proven to be any more beneficial than calorie restriction. So, because essentially what most people are doing when they intermittent fast is they're giving up a meal. So they're really doing the same thing as calorie restriction. What I will say is if you are a fan and it's working and you love it, do you 100%. I am big on that. I never judge. I mean, you can be a vegan, keto, intermittent faster, and I will help you work. You know, I mean, I will help you make that work in a way that's getting you all the nutrients that you need. What I will say though, I'm a big believer in breakfast for way too many reasons. Then, you know, we don't even have time for why I believe in breakfast so much, but if you intermittent fast, please shift your window to the morning to include breakfast and have an earlier dinner instead of this 12-8 thing that is so, it's just so random. There's no point to 12-8. Shift it to include breakfast. That can be 10, so 10-4, whatever, but just eat breakfast, set yourself up that way, eat some protein. It'll feel better for sure.
That's good to know too.
That is very good to know. I always felt like I could not do it, which I love food. So I'm one that would feel deprived. So that would not work for me. And I think I tried it like 2 days and I play tennis and I thought, I am not going to make it through a match without eating breakfast. I just knew I wouldn't do it.
And that is how whenever a woman comes to me or as somebody asks me, you know, is this diet, what do you think of this diet, that diet? I say, it might be beautiful for you, but or it might not be, but here's the question you have to ask yourself. And every woman should ask herself this if she's thinking of changing, you know, her diet pattern or the foods she's eating. Will you eat this way for the rest of your life and love it? Because if the answer is no, you've got to find something else. Because even if it works, let's say the goal is to lose weight. So you do keto, you will lose weight. And about 3 months in, you might be like, oh, I just cannot do this anymore. Then you've wasted 3 months of your life when we could have been figuring out something that would be sustainable for you. So you got to think long-term. Whatever is working, you have to keep doing in order for it to continue to work.
That's really good advice because it's
That's
true.
Yes,
It's a lifestyle change. It's not, that's why we don't like using the term diet.
Mhm.
Because it really is about your lifestyle and are you on vacation? Are you not? Do you have kids at home? Do you know? It's so variable.
Right.
So,
Yes. And each woman is unique. So and again, like you were saying, like I could never do intermittent fasting. Like, let's say 5 years from now, research comes out, oh, it's an awesome, like it's really good for your cardiometabolic health and all of this. But if you would be miserable doing it, forget it. There are other ways. You know, there are other ways to get you in great metabolic health without any form of restriction whatsoever.
And I love how you say metabolic health instead
right.
of shape or this. I love that it's metabolic health. that you
Yes, and
said.
body composition. I really wish we could take the focus off of weight. I wish more doctors understood this too. Just going back to that, it's not about, even they know, it's not about weight. It's about shifting your body composition to less adipose tissue and more muscle mass. That's what we want. The number on the scale matters very little. It's about muscle mass and less adipose tissue, particularly in the belly area.
And we know as menopausal women, that belly area is just like grows daily. You're like, oh, okay.
What happened?
What did I eat last night?
I know. I have a client who said, I think my belly waved at me this morning.
It's possible.
Oh,
I can see that.
Yeah.
But you're not doing anything wrong. It's a very normal shift in terms of what happens. But it's just because of that visceral fat piece that can be metabolically harmful, we want to give it some love.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that's important to remember.
Right.
So,
And you mentioned some books you wanted to make sure you
Oh, yes.
mentioned.
Okay. So in terms of, particularly as it pertains to brain health, there is a brand new cookbook that I love, The Brain Health Kitchen. That is Dr. Annie Fenn. She's also on Instagram. Brain Health Kitchen is her handle.
right.
And then Dr. Lisa Mosconi.
Mhm.
She has two books, Brain Food and The XX Brain. I'm sure you ladies know about that book. And then if sleep is an issue for you, or if you're just fascinated by sleep or whatever, I just love this book so much. It's called Why We Sleep. Oh my goodness. I just had a brain fog moment. I blanked. Matthew Walker, I believe. Why We Sleep. Yeah, those are all great.
Well, we'll make sure to add those into our
Yeah.
show notes as well. I think I've seen the Brain Health Kitchen one.
Yeah, it's really great. I mean, great recipes, but also the way she lays out, it's based on the MIND diet, MIND, which was the result of a research study at Rush University, Chicago in 2015 that kind of manipulated the Mediterranean diet, combined it with the DASH diet, dietary approaches to stop hypertension, combined those two and targeted Alzheimer's. So the MIND diet, Mediterranean dash interventions for neurodegenerative delay.
That's a mouthful.
That's a mouthful. Mind diet. Anyway, Brain Health Kitchen is based on that, an updated version of that. So she gives a lot of great information on how food affects the brain. But Brain Food by Lisa Mosconi is awesome too.
Well, we will make sure to have those in the show notes. Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Barbie, for coming on. This was, we know the listeners are going to just enjoy this episode, and we learned so much as well. So thank you
Yes.
for coming
I'm
on.
so glad. Thank you so much, ladies. You're so fun to talk to too. Made my morning.
Well,
Thank you.
You made ours. Now we have to go check our sugar intake. But hold on one second. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Great. Take care.